with a global vision, but also an intellectual with diversified experiences. Currently, he is a freelance advisor in Indo-Japanese relations, deputy chair, Kansai Japan-India Cultural Society, Kobe, and holds distinguished positions in Indo-Japan Business Council, Pune, KKCCS Indo-Japan Business Bridge, Chennai, India-Japan Business Desk, Kocher and Company, New Delhi, etc. A dynamic professional with profound knowledge of business management, he has also taught in many academic institutions such as IIT Bombay, IIT Allahabad, IIM Calcutta, Indore, Nagpur, MIT Pune, and Ajikankya D.Y. Patil University, Pune. Welcome, Isogai-san, to Kizuna Forum, and thank you very much for sparing your time despite your hectic schedule.
Thank you so much.
All. I request the chair to now take over. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. And thank you, everyone. And I'd like to thank the organizer to welcome me on this very special occasion. And special welcome to the speaker today, Mr. Manish Prabhune. He is going to talk about a very, very interesting topic today. I was very much astonished by hearing his title of the speech today and the topic itself, comparing India and Japan, and in the management perspective, he's going to talk about India-Japan relations. And we will be hearing from him a lot of insights about Indo-Japan relations and how it can develop for the future relations, as well as for the future growth of the both nations. Let me come back to you all after hearing all his presentation and speech, and let's discuss what we can do together and how India and Japan can develop and for the prosperous mutual future together. Thank you, Manish-san. You are welcome to start your very interesting topic and presentation. Thank you.
Isogai-san, thanks so much. And I hope I'm audible to all. Let me know if you feel there is any problems with the audio or the video and stuff like that. But as Isogai-san has now, kind of raised the bar for me to say like very interesting. So now I need to make it interesting, right? I mean, like I don't want people to fall asleep. So I think hopefully I'm gonna, kind of give it all in terms of putting myself as an example. Why do I say that? Is that I would like to basically look at this study forum in the context that, as Sushila madam said, like I've been here for 26 years. 26 years is quite some time if you really think about it. And I think I've tried to basically see various different patterns in terms of how me with kind of a very very kind of a Indian upbringing, and then coming over to Japan in my adulthood, and then looking at a very different world view out over here, and it's basically taught me how to basically look at different intersections, and hopefully both the Kumiko and the Raas Leela is probably gonna give you some insights in terms of what is primarily kind of the marketplace here in Japan. What can we learn from the various cultural intersections? And more than me speaking, I think let's look at a little bit more of a visual in terms of what I can basically bring to the table. So I'm gonna share the slide. Let me know if you see it. Maybe Isogai-san or Sushila madam, if you can please let me know if you see the slide, and if I'll just assume like everybody's able to see it.
Yes, please.
Okay, great. So I'm assuming
now it's visible.
that...
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Isogai-san. Thank you so much. So there we go. So I think, I mean, this is the whole idea, like intersecting, cultures, workplace dynamics. We are kind of talking some very, very, kind of abstract, kind of concepts here. But what is Kumiko? I think that is what a few of you might be, wondering. That's what I'm going to introduce today. Krishna's Raas Leela, maybe, I mean, like the Indian, kind of members who have joined out over here already know about it. but we'll dive into that in terms of how does it relate in terms of the Kumiko woodwork. Okay, so woodwork is something that first I will show you. On the left is a snapshot from my home, something that I do in my spare time. So, what is Kumiko? So, let me show you what Kumiko is. Do you see this pattern out over here? It's something that I've made. Probably it took me around maybe 25 hours or something like that to put this together. So, it's a pattern, it's a Kumiko pattern. If you see the woodwork out over here, this is also a Kumiko pattern. And we are going to talk a little bit about it. Okay.
Yes,
So,
yes.
let's look at what we can basically bring to the table today. So, why do we discuss this? First and foremost, the whole idea is not just to talk about some Kumiko woodwork and Raas Leela, figure out some kind of commonalities, but it finally should connect into what it means from a Indo-Japan business collaboration going forth. Okay, and how we will basically look at it is I'm going to use a word called as diaspora retention. What is it? What is that idea? Just keep it at the back of mind that we'll finally dovetail into something called as diaspora retention. I mean, to scale it, we need something, and that's the why and the how of my today's discussion. So, just to keep things a little bit, simple, I'll basically go with the introduction. Sushila madam already introduced me, but yeah, I basically work as the head of the industry strategy and marketing team for the PDF or the Photoshop company called as Adobe. Okay, so that's the company that I work for. We are headquartered in San Jose, and in Japan, we are headquartered here in Tokyo. What does my everyday look like? So my everyday basically is something like this. My job description comes in like across different industries, across different business domains. I look at unstructured data day in day out. I need to figure out any intersections in terms of what are the industry trends, where is this whole kind of economy moving on to, and I need to derive those insights. And finally, I need to connect into something that we very popularly call in Silicon Valley is DDOM. It is basically data driven operating models. I mean, everything today is about being software or data, and we are certainly going to talk about kind of that data driven operating model towards the end of the discussion. But yes, this is my primary job: unstructured data and intersections. I think that's what my primary job is. I basically work with different CXOs, CEOs, CFOs, chief marketing officers across the Japanese ecosystem. And I need to do a lot of storytelling, and I need to bring it from very, very unstructured stories that I hear across the board. Okay. So we'll look at a few stories today, and we will first basically begin with a little bit of an unstructured view. So if you have to be a, kind of a thought leader, your career cannot be everything. You have to have a very wide canvas of ideas, and for that you have to put yourself into the game. So I remember as early as 2003, I think that was the time when I started to say, like, okay, if I have to be in Japan and I have to be a good bilingual engineer, I think I should be very good at the linguistic side of the equation. So I started blogging in Japanese. And I think in those days, I mean, today getting millions of views on YouTube is something that is like a very, very popular thing for the YouTubers of the day. But think about this. This is about 2003 to 2009, when I used to write a gaming blog on PlayStation portables. And even in those days, it was about 62 million unique visitors that I had to my website over the 6 years period, essentially meaning like 10 million, visits that I was basically getting out over there. Used to give me a lot of Google AdSense revenue, was driving a lot of affiliates and stuff like that. So in a way, it was good way in terms of discovering how you basically create money. So as a salaried person, you sometimes are only looking at your, a paycheck coming towards the end of the month, but this was like more in terms of driving your own business, okay, and driving an internet business if you really think about it. As I said, like I basically do intersections, right? So I need to figure out different patterns and define new value propositions. So how do you define new value propositions? So this is something that I did in 2007. I saw that people on trains do solve Sudoku, like arrangement of 0 to 9, all of those numbers and stuff like that. At the same time, I also know about crosswords, right? So what I essentially did was like I created an intersection pattern wherein I said like, okay, I'll put a crossword style, but it will have some calculation mechanics into it. And I basically created this kind of a puzzle of sorts, which was very something, kind of innovative in those days. This is a Nintendo DS software which actually sold 62,000 copies. And to be very honest, it did not sell to the youngsters. Okay, I mean they don't care for all of that stuff. It was something that was sold to 60 age 60 plus. I mean it was a boom time for brain training games on the Nintendo DS platform. And this is the first intersection that I remember basically was wildly popular at that point in time. I did many TV interviews and shows and stuff like that. Well, that boom is now all gone, but it's one way of showing how intersection can lead to new value propositions and define new experiences for users. Beyond that, I think what I would essentially say is like I have a habit of discovering these kind of new value propositions. For example, I blog very frequently on my blog experiencetokyo.net. These days I don't, but I used to do it at least till a year back. And that is how Sushila madam actually discovered me. And she came and kind of had this conversation as to can I bring any ideas to the table. So what I do on this blog, I mean everybody has a travel blog, but I think I have a habit of doing something original out over here, and this is what I have been doing. For example, Tokyo Tower, which was there right from the days of 1960s, stands at 333 meters. We've got the new, thing called as Tokyo Skytree, which is nearly the two times the size of it. Okay, so what I've essentially done is like using kind of mathematics. I basically figured out like if I basically do a Apollonius circle kind of a intersection, what I certainly know is like in which part of Tokyo if I stand will I see Tokyo Skytree and the Tokyo Tower at of the same height. So that is something which is new value. It is not just oh, I saw Tokyo Tower, here are a few pictures. No, you should basically show at least 47 different locations that I know of wherein Skytree and Tokyo Tower look of the same height. And these are the kind of different things in terms of like something new, something creative that you can basically bring to the table. And that's something that I always love to do. And obviously, I mean, given the fact, like, I mean, not only just the Tokyo Tower and Tokyo Skytree, but I love doing the photography of even Mount Fuji for that matter. I mean, I know so many places which probably are not known to regular tourists in terms of exactly defining like not just the Shinkansen passing in front of the Mount Fuji, but two Shinkansens intersecting at the exact point. So I mean, I do a lot of these kind of activities. What I essentially want to tell you is not about like what I have done great, but I want to basically go back a little in terms of like not only me, but many different kind of people who came from different parts of India to Japan in the early 2000. What did we actually really go through? What are the various different experiences that we have had? So look at my pattern as just one pattern. Others also have basically seen some similar patterns. So let's basically begin with this image of Mount Fuji. When did I come to Japan? So let's not look at this image of Mount Fuji. There's a different image of Mount Fuji that I want to show. Do you see the Mount Fuji here? Okay. So this is about the urban land price index in the time when I came to Japan, which was 1998. Think about it. Like I came to Japan essentially when the bubble had burst, recession was on the cards. The moment I landed in Japan, people are already talking about words like kosto sakugen, which essentially means like cut costs. Okay. So essentially it was a rough time. People were trying to look at am I going to be able to keep my job? Are the made in Japan concepts of the monozukuri or the kind of concepts which were very prevalent at that point in time, are they going to stand the test of time? I think that was the time which was one of the most toughest ones that I basically chose as the worst time to come to Japan. That's the first point. So why did I come here? Obviously, because if cost reduction was there, people like me were basically coming to Japan because Japan wanted much more cheaper labor on the IT side and the other side of the equation. And I basically came here as an on-site offshore model, kind of a project manager in IT. But the whole idea was labor arbitrage. So essentially, it means if I'm earning X in India, probably I'm earning 5 to 10X in Japan. So I have a kind of a incentive to come to Japan. I think that's the more simpler way of explaining that I came here when essentially things were looking very unstable, and it was not a very pretty time to come in, to be very honest. Third, and the biggest point that I essentially saw was this. Japan already was like this. If you were to get onto a train on a subway, nobody was actually looking at anyone. People were completely into their phones, right? So, and this was in 1998. That's what I'm trying to say. So 1998 was the time when they basically had launched what NTT Docomo called as I mode. And just in 10 years, I have seen the world completely gravitate to something called as an iPhone. So we today live in that this kind of an I economy. What I essentially want to say is like Japan has consistently, after we have arrived in the early 2000s, missed these kind of opportunities, wherein whether it was an iPhone disrupting the iMode ecosystem, whether now it is Tesla, which is probably gonna disrupt, something in the automotive market. We'll see if that really happens. Dot coms coming in and completely redefining things, like the Googles and the other big guys of the world coming in and kind of redefining, saying like the product alone wasn't important, the service and the experience was absolutely important. So I've actually come to this country when the Made in Japan party was nearly over. Okay, so this is what the Indian diaspora was actually experiencing. So just understand that this is the actual start point, that it was not a pretty time to come to Japan. And essentially that is where doing multiple kind of jobs. I was in the pharma industry and this and that. Basically want to just touch up on the base. Like if you are basically a creative guy thinking about intersections, thinking about patterns, and a company like Adobe is absolutely the place that where you want to be. We basically believe in the creative economy of sorts. Like we've got products like Photoshop and the rest of the things, and this company has been very very important in terms of getting me introduced to Kumiko. And we'll see a little bit of that. So we'll talk a little bit of the art and science of this company and understand how did I actually get to know Kumiko. Okay, so let's look at it. We started off quite early in the Silicon Valley as a DTP company, wherein what we essentially did was that there was this Macintosh computer and there was this laser printer. And what we essentially said is like you have 72 dots per inch screen and you have a 72 inches printer, which essentially meant like what you see is what you get. So anybody having an access to a printer and a computer, we had written the software called as Aldus, which actually makes sure what you see is what you get. So we basically democratized print. That's the overall perspective as to where this company comes from. And we've got a whole tons of tools for this creative economy, whether it's PDF, whether it is Adobe Photoshop, Illustrator. I mean, I don't really need to get into the details of this, but then what I essentially want to tell you is like I have been surrounded by customers who are part of this creators economy, and that is where I got introduced to Kumiko. I'll tell you how. Okay, so one of the softwares is called as AI. It's nothing to do with what is the buzzword of artificial intelligence. You see this one, yeah, AI, right? So it essentially is Adobe Illustrator. It allows you to do vector drawings. Okay, I won't get into what vector drawings is all about, but let's look at it. So this is one of our customers. They are called as Tanihata, and Tanihata Corporation is based in Nagano. And I was in the break room, just like I'm in the break room of my company today here. I was in the break room and I was looking at different magazines, and then there was this catalog which was about Kumiko. And I was like, what is this? I mean, what is it? So I just opened it up, I checked it. It showed a shoji or a partition screen completely made out of wood, and it was showing something called as fireworks. It took me a while to understand why was this fireworks, and it took me a while to totally see what I was actually experiencing was my first introduction in 2013 to the world of Kumiko patterns. I mean, I care for patterns, I care for intersections. Obviously, this was something that I was going to double click on. But what I essentially want to tell you is like, if you're in Japan, Kumiko is actually everywhere. I mean, it's so much there in your subconscious that I never really took a hard look at it until I basically discovered Tanihata as a customer. And I figured out like something was moving from my ambient awareness into my consciousness, something that is called as Kumiko. So this is the Kumiko, and we are going to talk a little bit about that and what it basically means to me, what I have learned from making these kind of things. And hopefully I'm able to excite a few people like you to basically try this stuff. This is a very easy to do stuff. So I'm like, as I said, like in Japan, there is Kumiko everywhere. Look at this hotel. I mean, it goes with the Hindi word andaz, the personal style, right? So it essentially andaz is a luxury hotel in Toranomon Hills. And look at the reception. It's made of full Kumiko. So this is a small Kumiko, but if you do a pattern of patterns and if you kind of create that network, you actually land up with such a beautiful reception front. with the right lighting and all of that stuff is something that can mesmerize you. But it's not what mesmerized me in terms of the design. It's about the approach. What it essentially was talking about was assembling wooden pieces without the use of nails. And I was like, oh, really? So this is what we are gonna, kind of check in terms of a very highly sensorial experience of Kumiko making. So without further ado, the first slide for the Kumiko thing is something that I'm gonna present to you guys. That I basically, after that, I went to the headquarters of Tanihata. It is in a beautiful location in Nagano. The Japan Alps is just next door. I mean, this was one of the most beautiful, kind of experience that I ever had, because I was there with a purpose, not just tourism. Out over here, what I can tell you is like a sensorial experience. By that, I essentially mean the five different senses. The moment I walked into that kind of a facility, it wasn't what I saw or what I heard and stuff. It was the first was the smell. Basically, Kumiko is made out of either the cedar wood or it's made of hinoki, which is the cypress. And the moment you enter a workshop, it's just basically that fragrance of that wood that basically captivates you. So essentially, it was not just a kind of a visual experience, but it's got that experience in terms of that smell that basically comes in. If you put a Kumiko in your home, the whole room is going to radiate with that kind of a smell. Next one, it's not just about the smell, it's also about the sounds. So you can actually see like the workers are actually tapping with a wooden block, and they are basically making sure like the pieces fit together. So it's also that sound. There's like a thon 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 thon. That's the kind of a sound which you can actually hear. Okay. Third more one, if you basically, it's not even about just of that stuff in terms of like a smell or what you hear. It's also about how you fit these pieces together, and they basically come to the precision of 0.01 mm. Even if there is a small differential in terms of the dimensions, the pieces are not going to fit together. It's all going to fall apart, and you cannot just expect a CNC machine or something to create those exact pieces. Sometimes it's your touch that you can tell you if this is going to fit. Is it going to stand its position in that overall matrix that you essentially create? So it was also about the touch that I basically discovered in the first day workshops. But then at the end of the day, when you start putting things together, it's not just directly viewing of that Kumiko pattern. It's also about a play of what we essentially called as the lights and the shadows. I think the light actually passes and the shadows are much more beautiful to look at. So it's also this visual experience, which doesn't mean direct, but it's a reflection. So reflection is a very different quality. And I think this is the overall four senses which finally need to get into your interior, which is your fifth, which is the taste. I'm just taking some presenter's liberty to do some play on words, but I think it was these five senses sensorial experience which Kumiko can give you. And I have seen companies make very cheap Kumikos. They just basically have a CNC machine. You feed the data, it just burns the whole wood and it gets created. But you're not gonna get the smell. You're not gonna get the other perspectives, and you could just end up landing with a cheap Kumiko in your hands. So essentially, just look at it. Just a 180 centimeter by 80 centimeter panel can cost you upwards of 90,000 yen. So that's how costly this handmade stuff is. And this is something which is kind of very unique in terms of like bringing some a cultural perspective, which was something I absolutely understand from Wikipedia, that they started this somewhere in the 8th century. So it's got a whole history of it, but we are going to get into a little bit more of a detail in Kumiko making. I'll show you what I basically assemble on a day-to-day basis. So let's get to the next stage. Let's start deconstructing Kumiko. Okay. So first and foremost, here is the one way that I basically wanted to first show you how a Kumiko is made. This is what I'm doing at my home. Multiple pieces. I'm like starting to make the lattice, and like that basically defines different structural constraints, because it finally needs to be in one particular shape, right? So this outer border that I can basically show you is something that is a lattice for this Kumiko pattern. Okay. Um, After creating very different pieces, these pieces have no glue. Everything is basically such perfectly chamfered to this 0.01 millimeter that it just stays on its own. I sat down with Isogai san before he came to this lecture, and I showed him making this stuff actually in front of him in terms of how it starts getting the strength, how it starts basically coming together. And this is something I believe is a very, very unique experience that everyone can try. There are multiple places in Tokyo even where you can do these kind of coasters. It somewhere around 3,000 yen for around 3 hours of a workshop that is usually done. So I think everybody should basically look at it. But at the same time, the whole idea is like even in India, many temples are constructed through something that we call as interlocking pieces of stones. And in this case, oh yeah, there is Isokai-san, so showing what I gave to him, the Kumiko pattern that I made for him in front of him. But then please understand that just look at it, like it's so tough, right? I mean, they have been made with such precise thing that each piece actually lends itself to the other one for support and also provides support. It's very, very inclusive in that sense. Okay, and I think usually like society should be like this, right? But then I think I'll just keep that away. Next piece is like something that I absolutely want every one of you to look. Just look at it. Like I have basically put this wooden piece in water. I have made sure like it can fold. Now I'm kind of trying to put it, but I'm banging on it from the top. So what I'm essentially trying to tell you is like it's not just like it stands on its own. Sometimes you have to use a little bit of a light force to ensure that there is cohesion, because there would be functional needs, or sometimes the decorative need is out over here, right? I mean, you can absolutely see like it looks like a beautiful flower out over there. So although it can stand on its own, sometimes light force is needed to basically put everything in its place. And there is a reason why that light force is important. That basically brings me to our next slide that basically I want to show you. But do understand, light force and pressure alone is something that can basically make these kind of very, very durable patterns. Let's see what it actually means for us. Okay, I'm going to kind of start, kind of dimming a bit of the definitions and only bring out the, kind of different words. Do you understand what I've tried to do? Doesn't an organization also look like that? As a CEO at the top and the final employee at the bottom, there are structural constraints that usually are put because there is a particular measurable business outcome that you need to do. And for that, employees are trained. It's a pretty violent element in that. But then people are cut to size at the precision wherein they are expected to have a role and a responsibility to exactly do what kind of they are expected to get some business outcomes for companies. They have to be interlocked. They have to absolutely depend on each other and all of that stuff. And sometimes some dumb then debates, right? I mean, like you need to have many tactics. Like light force is sometimes needed to basically bring a behavioral change. Not sure if it works in today's workplace, but I'm just giving you the construct in terms of like a very, very kind of a champagne tower kind of a scenario wherein every individual is actually well connected with others, and this structure kind of something that is like a kumiko is something that we also see in an organization matrix of sorts. Do not basically misunderstand like saying like a Japanese company is like this. No, any company can be like this. Okay, so this is the way I basically started looking at like what are the different elements that I can now kind of plot whether this actually works for today's stuff. So think about it: domestication, for the structure and the constraints of the business. You end up being a cog wheel. You really don't know what's happening across the ecosystem, but you need to do your role and responsibilities precisely, right? And these are the things which sometimes kind of lead to bad employee experiences, and we're going to talk about that because today's world in which we basically operate is a very, very different world. Chat gpt is coming in and it's basically disrupted everything. So there is a very different way of how kind of companies operate today. But then this is the basic idea that I want to tell you. Like, although this is a beautiful one, it's a very violent one in terms of like everything is based on pressure. Okay, and sometimes it can break. Okay, and even if one piece gives away, the whole lattice is just gonna fall off. Okay, so let's basically look at the next level in terms of what this actually lends to. What I'm essentially talking about, the cogwheel here, is something that I want to use the word called as distance. Do you see that there is a distance in terms of what the CEO has and what the employee is looking at? Absolutely, this piece wouldn't know what this piece is doing. They don't know the holistic element of it, and the distance can sometimes be killing. Let's see what the distance does. And it was very, very nicely captured in one of the 1992 movie, Tampopo, which was like a perfect way of telling like why this kind of a champagne tower doesn't really work. There is this restaurant scene. You can actually YouTube this exact word, Tampopo restaurant scene, and you will essentially see a company, basically of the CEO, the chairman, and the rest of the people. They basically go to a French restaurant that's opened newly in town. And yeah, I mean, this is a typical, the protocol is set as to who sits where, how, and all of those things. And the CEO takes the lead to ask the chairman, sir, what would you like to have today? He says like, oh, I'm not that much, hungry, so let's go with something light. And then finally it's for the CEO then to start making those orders. So in spite of coming to a French restaurant, he says like, okay, gonna go for a ramen. He's like looking at it, okay, consomme soup, like that's a basic soup that you basically order. No salad and beer. I mean, that he could have gone to a izakaya. Why did he have to even come to a French restaurant if he wanted to have just that, right? But what essentially I'm trying to talk about, once the CEO has spoken, the chairman shows like he's senior, right? So he still uses his mind, he's still looking at it, but he ends up ordering the same thing. Even the next directors are gonna order the same thing, to the level wherein if you really see that YouTube scene, you will see like the rest of the guys are just saying me too. Okay, so the distance that you have from a structured engagement is that people have a yes sir kind of a mentality. Nobody tries to innovate. They really don't know their roles because they are only looking at a particular role and a responsibility, a cog wheel kind of an approach. And what happens is like in this scene, one of the best parts is the guy who's just come yesterday. He just starts, he just says like, oh, he's like so well versed with how to order in a French restaurant. Like he's like going all over the place and kind of looking at the stuff and ordering the right stuff, which even the waiter says like, oh sir, you have got good taste, and which kind of literally blows off everyone away. And like they're like kind of like, oh dude, like you shouldn't be doing that. I mean, just fall in line. I mean, you don't do that stuff. I mean, I mean, the CEO has spoken and you just go with a yes sir attitude. I mean, this is what usually happens, right? And this is not just about a Japanese company. This is like anywhere that you can find this kind of a scenario. So I think this is what essentially the distance does. And I believe like the distance is something that every company is trying to resolve in terms of trying to have a very agile and a fast moving workforce in today's requirements. Okay, so how do you basically talk to customers with this? And that's where I will show you the first intersection in terms of how do I hold my CXO level meetings, how do I do elevator pitches. So if I have to tell that your employees are blinded to the fact in terms of what the holistic picture is, I show them this kind of a framework. This is a very very old kind of a painting that is basically done by Anabusa Icho-san, and that's like kind of literally you look at it like it's in 1652, right? What it actually talks about is a very very basic Indian concept. I'm not sure how many of you recognize it, but since now the idea is apparent that there is an elephant and then there are people trying to pull it, this is the same story about the seven men and the seven blind men and the elephant coming in from the Buddhist or probably the Jainism text that basically is there. So these are the kind of discussions that I have with CXOs, not giving them a kind of a American model, but something that they can very well relate to. Everybody's seen that left hand side picture in the museum in Kyoto, and like they absolutely totally understand where what I'm trying to tell them. So what I'm trying to say is like I come from an American company, Adobe is the company, but then when I basically put these kind of things, I basically leverage these kind of Indo-Japanese interactions on a daily level. I mean, it really depends on whom I'm meeting and what I'm talking to them. So there is a lot of things that we can actually look at from the history, and I believe like this is a good conversation starter. Only you, when you get that attention, in today's world getting attention is a very tough thing, and this attention is something that can basically drive your next conversations. What I'm trying to get to is that do you realize that on the slide number 2, when I was talking about myself coming to Japan in the early 2000 for labor arbitrage, in terms of saying like I'm just a low cost Indian IT resource now moving up the value chain and discovering different Indo-Japanese intersections to talk to CEO level people to make them understand how can they start looking at an innovative model for their companies going forward. This is what is happening with the diaspora. I am just one example. There are many people around me. I just started when it was just 800 people here in Tokyo. Today we've got 43,000 people in Japan here, right? So what I'm trying to say is like the number of people that you talk to, you will see more patterns in terms of how they basically interact with their customers today, how India has moved up the value chain, and why Japanese corporations today find a very different value proposition when talking to Indians who are right now in Japan. Okay, so if I've made that point, I think this is what is one of my customers. I've been working with her for over 5 years now. Her name is Totori-san from JAL. I'm not sure if you've heard the news, but she started as a cabin attendant in 1972. Today, she is the CEO of Japan Airlines. And look at it, what she's trying to say. She's saying, like, I want to have a company where all employees can thrive. How can all employees thrive? Only when they have visibility, when they absolutely understand not this cogwheel kind of an approach, but what they are actually doing has perceptible outcomes in terms of what they do for JAL as a company. So these are the kind of people who are talking to us, and they expect basically us to basically create a bridge to somewhere. Where is that bridge? And the bridge essentially is here. uh, she doesn't want only to talk to me, but she wants to get into Silicon Valley. She wants to look at how are these companies innovating so fast, keeping their flock together, and still are able to kind of generate amazing revenue, I mean, on the side. And this is the place which I am starting to, kind of get into the position wherein the Indian diaspora sitting here in Japan and just giving some offshore work to Indian company, those days are far over. That's just gone. There is no, kind of labor arbitrage remaining. People have moved to the next level of the value chain, and today we are trying to create the bridges with the Silicon Valley executives, and that's what my primary job is to basically get the executives in Japan to speak with the global perspective CEOs. All of them are Indians by chance, and they want to understand why are Indians so successful? What are their patterns of thinking? How are they able to keep their flock and basically flourish from there? So I believe like these are the next level of bridges that we have started to do. And for that, I'll just basically show you what we do at Adobe and what's the way in terms of what we actually do in terms of consulting our customers. Look at this image. This was something that I got when I joined this company in 2013, maybe a year after I joined in. Okay. What I'm trying to say is that this image, which is right now animating in front of you, none of the girls are real. They're all AI generated. They're all AI generated. Basically, the AI has been trained inside Adobe way back, even before you thought about Chat GPT and OpenAI. We didn't release this kind of software into the wild because we just didn't know whether it would have a very disruptive impact on the creative economy of this company. But this is the kind of innovation that is happening. Okay, none of these girls are real for real. And what I essentially want to say is that when we basically are looking at Valet today, AI is completely disrupting us. Okay, so disruptive innovation is something that is basically happening. The Japanese executives want to understand how to ride this wave of disruptive innovation. So the marketplace evolves literally every day. Every 2 weeks down the line, I'm looking at something new that comes into the market, which basically becomes a challenge for Adobe. Okay, and you can't move in that champagne tower structure. It's just not possible. You can't just get commands and do something, right? I mean, you need to have a high velocity collaboration happening, and the complete thing works on very agile ways in terms of how we are structured today. We also can't just work inside our company. So how AI needs to be something that not we don't have a closed way of doing this. We have to innovate with the customer. We have to understand at every step that whatever we are providing in functions and feature, is it really resonating? Is that what the customer really wants? So it's a very asymmetric engagement in that sense. So that structure which we were talking certainly does not work at all. And we basically need to purpose very creative talent. I mean, like, these are the people who basically are purpose driven, and to get their creative energies requires a very different model, not a structure like this which is built on pressure. Okay, so that is where basically I want to look at. Yes.
But I think we are running short of time. Please,
Yeah,
can
sure.
you? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely, absolutely. So I think let's look at it like in this is the place when I will now start getting into the Ras Leela side of the equation in terms of what we are trying to showcase is like you don't suddenly move from a structure to a very unstructured thing, because that would essentially mean chaos. Okay. So this chaos is something that we are trying to resolve through Ras Leela. That is what the new level of engagement is being shown. So look at this storytelling. Okay. This is a picture. What do you see here? I'm not getting into the mythological storytelling of it, but just a visual storytelling wise, look at it that this is happening at the night, the time of fear. It's happening in the forest, a place of uncertainty. The gopis are there of their own free will. Nobody has dictated them that they should come to the office. Think about this as an office. Okay. just as people start coming in, they organically organize themselves in a circle. Okay, and Krishna is part and parcel of that stuff, and every gopi is very close to her Krishna. What I'm essentially trying to talk out over here is like, if this is a new pattern that we are looking at, it essentially talks about moving from not to a chaos, but in terms of a circle, which means that essentially I have an organization which is working to make sure like the disruptive innovation is taken care of. How? Because in this uncertain marketplace, the gopis assemble of their own free will. So it's about the qualitative element of the leadership that we are talking out over. It's not just about a structure. And the leadership is not just basically giving commands, but is actually participating in execution. And that is what basically we are trying to create a flat structure. That is what the Japanese organizations are trying to learn. And that is what they are trying to define in terms of what is an equidistant leadership that can be brought in. So my perspective today to every one of you is to look at these different patterns and not look at something as a reality or a utopia, but how can we basically bring these new different ways of working. And this is what the Indian kind of the diaspora is basically now kind of how should I say, they are just basically kind of giving this next steps of kind of engagement to the world at large. Okay, since I'm running out of time, I think I'll certainly need to go to the next level. I think I can't go through all those stuff, but then let's look at some kind of structures wherein like what is the successful diaspora of Japan look like. And I would like to bring in Mr. Nitesh Banga here. He's someone who was in Japan, hardly spoke Japanese, but was here for over 20 years and has been a very successful business guy, if you really think about it. He basically became the CEO of Global Logic after he moved from Infosys to there. And he basically, kind of sold it to Hitachi for a cool $9.6 billion, which basically means like the diaspora out over here is no more on that labor arbitrage game. They are actually driving the new business. And today we have moved from a 800 people diaspora, which was in 2000s, to 48,000 today, which essentially means like although we are very far from where Germany, even a city like London and Los Angeles today are, I think we need to understand how can we basically scale these 48,000 kind of diaspora members into the next level for the Indo-Japan relationship and business collaboration. Four levers, and that's the final slide that I will showcase. I essentially want to tell is like for long, uh, people in, I mean, like the corporations in India have been talking about let's basically do more Japanese language programs and stuff. I believe that's a completely flawed model. I think things have moved from there. What I'm essentially trying to say is like people who are 20 years, 25 years here in Japan are leaking, meaning like they basically gravitate towards the Western markets. If they get that kind of a job, they basically move on. So what I would essentially try to say is like as we basically create more Japanese speaking resources, shouldn't we also have a retention strategy? I mean, how do you retain that kind of a diaspora? Think about even if they don't go, their sons, their daughters are essentially going out and basically going into US universities and they never come back. I mean, that's the kind of generation we actually want, because this is the diaspora. This is the generation which understands different patterns, both the structured and the unstructured way of working. And if they basically do not, they are not retained out over here, the next kid who is coming from Japan, from India to Japan, will always think like, oh, the people who are here are gravitating towards there. I think probably I should move in too. So I think we need to remove the misconception of just putting something from the top of the funnel when the funnel from the bottom is leaking, and try to understand in terms of like how we can start kind of integrating this diaspora into much more of a retention dialogue rather than newcomers acquisition dialogue. And there could be different patterns. I mean, like the study forum is kind of having so many members here. We could even think about not just basically looking at the diaspora, but attracting younger Japanese to India. Let me tell you, like the Indian schools in Japan have a lot of Japanese kids, but they again go back to US universities also. Can we basically get them to continue in India? Because if those kind of successful patterns are shown, I'm pretty sure the diaspora will see a value in terms of staying with this Japanese ecosystem, and all the things that they have learned is something that can be repurposed for the growth story for the next level of this relationship between India and Japan. So that's what I wanted to bring to your discussion out over here. Hopefully, I mean, like I still have kept enough time for Isogai-san to come in and pitch his perspectives. And absolutely, after that, I'm happy to answer any questions if you have. So, Isogai-san, I'll pass on the baton to you because I know you are essentially working to get more Japanese to come to India and actually, work with us. So, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Manish-san. It was splendid. It was very, very interesting story that you have made. Wooden material in a collective way makes very meticulously made with the precision that is Kumiko rising, experience. That's a great observation. And it is very interesting that you have taken that part of the Japanese traditional artwork or the craftsmanship into the different perspective of management style, or maybe for the future prospects, that how India and Japan can collaborate even more, and even much young generation can make some new innovations, co-innovation together. And this is very interesting. And I think we needed to have some more time to listen to you in the whole story. But because of the time constraints, I'd like to just to invite some of the audiences today, and from Indian side or Japanese side, how they felt about what you have brought up. It was very so much interesting topic. And I was also not very aware about Kumiko, but you gave me this, and I just got remembered. Yes, this was something that we have since long time back.
Yes, right.
And the Raas Leela, I haven't had any thought about this, but comparing this and with this Kumiko was so much of interest. Yes.
Well, thank you.
So
Thank you.
let
Thank
me
you so much.
invite all the audiences here. Is anyone please open up and please make any comments or questions. Mr. Jain, or are you there?
Yes.
Please go ahead.
Yes. Am I audible?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, good.
Yes.
This is very fascinating because I think...
If you're audible, please put your camera on if you can.
Yes. Okay, okay, can you see me now, I suppose?
Yes, absolutely. We can see.
It's very fascinating because you brought in Raas Leela as a spontaneous kind of structure that emerges.
Yeah.
Now, surely, I mean, this is the spontaneity is something which, I don't know, culturally, the Japanese seems to be kind of more training oriented. I mean, if I compare it with, let's say, kabuki and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
This, is it a cultural difference or is it just a difference of perspective?
Yeah, sure. Dr. Ashok, thanks for your question. I sincerely believe that when I show patterns, I cannot really get into the position of, kind of making it generalized for a particular nation as a whole. I mean, it's a very, very different way of looking at things. Like you can look at a very unstructured organization, even in Japan. For example, like I'd look at Rakuten. Rakuten is one of that kind of, it's very spontaneous in its way. And what I understand is like even Sony in its heydays was that kind of a spontaneity which led to innovation. So I really don't think this is a cultural thing. If you really get down to the double clicks, you will see like both sides exist in both sides of the culture.
Yes. So I believe that's very important because I think the perspectives with which you see the relationship becomes very, I mean, it's really very rich rather than being stereotyped. And I think this is where, at least for our forum, this is an important aspect to remember. And maybe Sushila ji and I can think, and I'll bring in this before the advisory committee members also, to see how we can build this, in a sense, stream of thinking into
Yes.
our lectures. Because
Sure thing.
otherwise our lectures are more factual. But
I get
behind
that.
those facts, there is a story. And I think
Yes,
it will be
absolutely.
fascinating to bring out that story from
Yeah.
those lectures.
Yes.
This would require your time and
Absolutely.
attention.
Absolutely.
But I'm excited. Yes, thank you so much. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Ashok. Thank you. Yeah, I think I see one more hand going up. Archana, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
please go.
thank you, Doctor. And now Archana-san, Sasutri-san.
Yes, I
Yes,
come from
please go ahead.
background, and I do find a very fascinating correspondence with my own understanding of,
Yeah.
say, the whole concept of what we would call a kind of a culturally structured and architectural geometry of space. You
Yeah.
know, and the closest correspondence I would see it is in terms of Islamic architecture.
Sure.
Which in
Mm.
terms of pure geometry, deals on the same.
Yeah.
And from the Japanese viewpoint, I would look at it in terms of the miniaturization of it,
Uh-huh.
miniaturization
Okay.
of
Okay. Yeah.
landscape and things. And of course, this whole concept of light-weighted screens lends itself automatically, to
Yeah.
that.
Yes.
But when it comes to, I mean, I was a little taken aback because I somehow, when it came to Raas,
Yeah.
almost everything has a innate structure pattern within which things happen.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's never a chaos. So,
Absolutely.
in that sense, I mean, even if I look at, let's say, the digital technology today,
Sure.
there are kind of grids, there are networks within a network, and
Absolutely.
they can be channelized almost everywhere. But
Yeah.
again, context becomes very, very important. Where
Absolutely.
they are and how do you connect them and how do you network them,
Yes.
So sometimes, I mean, that's where I found Ras Leela a little out of the context.
Sure.
I mean, that was my observation.
No, absolutely. And thank you so much, Archana madam. I'll give you the perspective because I think I literally ran out of time towards the end. I wanted to talk about the other element which is super critical. And I think Dr. Ashok also kind of referenced it a little bit because, I mean, like, okay, fine. If I look at Ras Leela as a structure wherein it is very spontaneous, it comes together and all of that things. The whole idea is like it's not only about that. It's basically a very very well structured engagement in itself, but then how do you kind of put that together? And I think that was what I wanted to actually talk in the second half, which was more about data driven operating model, because when you're actually innovating, it sometimes seems chaos. Okay, and you absolutely need to know, are you really getting to the next levels in terms of what you want to reach? Because once you start creating a product, you figure out that what you started with as an original idea never gets into that final stage of the equation, and that is the data driven operating model which can basically bring structure to the things. I mean, how do you read that chaos? That is what the data basically starts talking about. I mean, I can certainly showcase to you what data does, and like I absolutely know, like data is not the only thing, right? Just because there is no data doesn't mean that things don't exist. The context still exists, absolutely exists.
Yeah.
But I think it's about talking about Ras Leela in terms of a holistic view, in terms of employee experience, which is not many times measurable. But what is measurable is basically the product that you create and basically how your customers gravitate towards it. So it's bringing these two different ecosystems. The problem with the made in Japan concept was like the makers had a mindset that they internally had their own idea as to what products they wanted to create. But today it's not that. It's basically customers who are kind of defining what products and what experiences should be in these products. And there are many, tangibles and intangibles. I think that is where Raas Leela brings one element, and you need to have the data-driven operating model on top of it for it to basically work as a cohesive unit.
Yeah, but Raas Leela as a model, as a cultural model,
Yes.
it would be something which the Indians would be very familiar with.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
to kind of interpret and translate it to a Japanese, sort of mind,
Yes.
thinking pattern, is it not very difficult? I mean, it's a little out of context.
Absolutely. But at the end of the day, when, like if you really think about it, even today in Japan, we essentially see that the momentum is basically getting into the place wherein people today don't talk about protocols. They don't talk about the hierarchy. They are looking at how to create these flat structures. So what I saw in 2000s was when I had a chair without even the arms, kind of arm rest, because like that was the protocol and that was the structure. Like unless you don't reach a particular level, you don't even get an armrest. No more. I think the organizations today, if you go to Rakuten or if you go to even Uniqlo, I mean, I very frequently speak to the CEO Yanai-san. I mean, he's creating this flat structure inside this company and is literally saying by 2030 we need to have at least 80% of the workforce which is going to be foreign nationals. Basically, he's trying to create that kind of a disruption. So I see that thing evolving over the time.
So I'm just curious.
Yeah.
I have to kind of reflect on it. But
Sure.
when you have a kind of a diasporic community,
Yes.
people with different kind of cultural experiences,
Yes.
everything is different, topography, their cultural context, how to behave, their social structuring, everything.
Yes.
So, how does one actually create a scenario in which this
Yeah.
kind of interaction and kind of understanding of each other actually
Yeah.
comes about? What is
Awesome.
the common language?
Absolutely. I'm very clear on that, Archana madam. Thanks for asking this question. I'm so happy that you asked this question. So let me give it to you in factual data numbers. Today, I essentially said we have 48,835 Indian nationals in Japan. Okay.
Yes.
If you look at the other way round about it, we don't have more than 7,000 Japanese nationals in India. What it essentially says is like if you need to have a handshake, it's not only incumbent on the Indian diaspora to just say like, oh, we will keep kind of learning Japanese, but it's more in terms of getting the Japanese nationals to figure out that, oh, India is that next in that next league and we need to go there. So rather than speaking Japanese, I would love to work with Isogai-san to get more Japanese to come to India and try to understand what we can do together. I think it's a thing which you can certainly do. I mean, I've seen companies like Infosys basically doing immersion programs in Mysore, wherein the Japanese members who get disrupted after coming to India 6 months down the line, that's a global workforce, which even today I have a few friends from Infosys here in Adobe, and those Japanese nationals are very, very different. They see a much more wider, canvas to play in. And I think that is where we need to take it. So rather we investing time in, just learning Japanese, I think it's more for us to basically get the Japanese to come over more to India. I think the policy should go down there. That's my contention.
May I just add a footnote?
Yeah,
I think
sure.
I get the impression that because we have Janushruti and many professors who are teaching Japanese, so we are
Sure.
not denying that space. I mean, that
Sure.
space is important. We are saying add to that something more. I mean, it's not that learning of Japanese in India is
Yeah.
needs to be curtailed or discouraged.
Sure,
No,
sure, sure.
no.
Absolutely.
I mean, I think I thought it will be necessary to
Continue.
emphasize clearly. And I
Yeah.
am very glad because I think we have not really thought of involving in our forum the so-called business community or the enterprise community. And I think
Yeah,
that
exactly.
that has been, in fact, the Japanese embassy, the minister particularly has been emphasizing that very much.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I will discuss this with our advisory committee
Sure.
and also with Deepa Gopalan Wadhwa, ambassador,
Sure.
because I think we need to bring in, even amongst the mixed scholars who have got mixed scholarship, Some of them have become entrepreneurs. So I think
Absolutely.
that somehow our focus has been and will continue to be on scholars,
Yeah.
but add to that, so to enrich our forum. I think so. Your lecture that way, and Isogai-san's joining us. Uh, but I'm afraid, Isogai-san, you will have to give more time to us then. In future.
Thank you. Thank you. Actually, we are running out of time. So I'd like to invite just one Japanese audience amongst here would
Yes.
like to say any few words. Anyone? Yes. Please, anyone go ahead, please. Just to say a few words
If they want
about
to.
this session. Anyone?
I think I
Well,
see.
it's always hard to have somebody from Japan side to talk. But anyway,
Azuma Sensei.
Sushira-san?
Yes.
Azuma
Asma
Sensei.
Sensei.
Hi.
Azuma
Yes, Azuma-san, please go ahead.
My name is Yoshiro
Yes.
Azuma. I'm a visiting faculty member at IIT Delhi. I really don't have very much to say, but I would just like to point out a fact about extreme lopsidedness of exchange of human resources. You talked about the necessity of bringing in Japanese youngsters to Indian universities. Okay, let me tell you that the current state of the affair is that at IIT there is absolutely zero Japanese student, either undergraduate or graduate. In fact, there are some other foreign students in graduate school, but non-Japanese foreign students, but in the undergraduate program, very few from anywhere at all, and absolutely zero Japanese students. This is a very, very extreme disparity, and I think if nothing is done, nothing will change. I don't know whether you can provide any advice, but I would be interested in hearing. But if you have anything to say, but at least I would like to just point out that the situation is very, very extreme. Yeah.
Yes. Azuma Sensei, thank you very much. I'm absolutely thrilled to basically listen to that. I'll basically give you a perspective that if we really sit down and just think like, who are those Japanese nationals who will even dream of coming to India? It's not going to happen organically. It's just not going to happen. You might do all commercials and all that. It's never going to happen, right? So let me give you a perspective. My daughter joined this school called as Global India International School in 2002. And she is born and brought up in Japan. And what I know for sure is like in Global India International School, the class is basically 60-40. 60% people are essentially Japanese nationals. Okay, 40% are basically Indians. What I'm trying to say here, if you don't begin and catch them young in the school itself, and basically because they are going to go through those 12 years of education or 16 years of education, and they are going to be in a disrupted format. They are not your regular Japanese members who are going to look at western universities. These are the students who have well versed with the Indian diaspora here in Edogawa too, and these are the right people who show us a little chance that they can go to the next levels. I'll give you, like, I'm not just presenting you, walking the talk is also extremely important. Because my daughter was born and brought up in Japan, I had to disrupt even her. So I did not choose a college in the US. Me and my wife were damn clear that we were going to go and take her to India. Right now, she's basically doing her cancer research in and biotechnology as a major in Manipal University in Karnataka. And we've got two other Japanese members who have actually joined her there. So it can only organically begin from the places wherein people are already aware of the fact that this is a kind of an ecosystem which exists. Otherwise, spreading the net just too wide, it's very difficult that we can bring in. So engaging those Japanese members with the diaspora is the best way. I basically think could be started off as an initial conversation.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Azuma.
Okay. Thank you so much, Paul. And I do appreciate all the discussions made today. And I do appreciate again, Manish-san, for your very keen observation about in Japanese culture. That was amazing, actually.
Sure.
You amaze me so much. And I think we are living in a world where when we say VUCA, the volatility, uncertainty you mentioned, and complexity and ambiguity, those VUCA world we are living in, and we need to have another VUCA as a solution, which is a very clear vision and deep understanding. And last A, in my opinion, is the adaptability to the changes of the world and to the different culture, which we need both India and Japan together to work out. And even for the young people to come to both different world is very, very important. I'd like to tell you that one of the groups of students, high school students, have already started to visit India for their school excursion trip abroad. And destination was India already since 2015. And this is going to grow. I'm sure there will be more schools will, promote this kind of trips to India from now on. Okay, now I'd like to conclude this session. Back to Professor Shishira-san, please.
Thank you so much, Manish-san and Isogai-san.
Madam?
Can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely, madam.
Please.
Thank you, Manish, for a very innovative and fascinating high-tech presentation. Really, it was wonderful having you. And it was really wonderful having Mr. Tomio Isogai-san as chair and listening to his insightful comments. In fact, both you, Manish-san and Isogai-san, your presence, it has bridged the gap between the corporates and academicians. And this is what Kizuna Forum, we want to invite more corporates into our forum, and we want such lectures so that, we are able to disseminate interest between India and Japan among the youngsters. Thank you very much. All Kizuna lectures are available on YouTube and the MOSAI website. And on behalf of the Kizuna India-Japan Study Forum, I thank all the participants for joining us via Zoom. I can see there are people from Japan, there are people from America, and of course, India. Our next lecture is on Between Dreams and Realities, Indian Women's Migration Experience in Japan by Dr. Megha Wadhwa. And it is scheduled for 22nd June. Same time, please do join. And Azuma Sensei will be chairing that session. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Namaskar.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Famous.
Bye-bye.